Well, how's everybody doing this morning?
Great.
You doing okay? Will you tell me if you're not?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And you two weren't here on Monday, okay? I'll do a quick. The good thing about speaking, twice in the same week is you can go back and one, review what you did a little bit, but more importantly, say, hey, did you get it? Some of the things that we talked about last week. This is pretty simple. As you move up the ladder of sports leadership, you're going to have to put together your systems. I mean, the simple ones. Some people use the metaphor example. All right, what's your elevator speech? Well, what is your leadership framework? In terms of the day-to-day, and what I tell people who directly report to me, I'm going to look at 5 C's. I'm going to look at the cash. The revenue and expense thing is something in sport you are going to do. As you move up the ladder, if you find yourself in a leadership role, that is going to be, regardless of your role, one of the most important things you're going to deal with. Sport is a business in my bias, and the only way we can repeat the activity is to make sure the revenue either meets or exceeds the expense of what we're doing, okay? The compliance can mean a lot of things. In college athletics, most people think that's just NCAA compliance. It's institutional, state, and it really is in terms of a lot of your financial practices and how you operate. It's your SOP. What is your simple plan? For me, if you ask me, what is it? Scott, do you have 3 things that can define how you lead? Well, for me, one would be systems. So why is that right up the list? So I can duplicate myself and other people. Okay? There are going to be core systems that you have to employ, whether it's travel, facilities, eligibility, compliance, fundraising, annual giving. I mean, it's a very long and exhaustive list. Secondly, the longer we lead, the longer we coach, and the higher you move up that ladder, the simpler you're going to get. Okay? The higher you are up that ladder, the less frequent you will have to use things like power. Understand? You are the person in charge, if you will. If you've got to use that, you've got an organizational issue that is probably pretty intense. But the second thing for me is just simplify, simplify, simplify. And the third one, and perhaps one of the most important things that we'll do day in and day out, is take great pains to remind yourself and develop the habit of treating each person like an individual. Not every situation will lend itself to that, but do not get into any kind of leadership in higher education, or I would even say city government, recreation, sport, tourism, unless you enjoy spending at least about 70% of your time with people. Now, what groups of people you spend your time with is going to change, okay, depending on your role and your position. I had positions where I spent a great deal of my time dealing with 4 or 5 governing boards, okay? Those people around those tables are usually, you can characterize them in 2 ways. They have influence and or they have affluence, okay? So that's a much different audience than, say, for example, when I was an assistant or a head coach in terms of recruiting. I had to spend my time quickly, hopefully meaningfully, with a lot of people, prospects, if you will, and their families. It's a much different audience. The other 2, or actually the other 3, competitiveness. Hey, what are your goals? You might have tiers of goals, okay? If I'm running a Major League Baseball team, I've got 1 to 2 rookie ball teams, I've got extended spring training, I've got long season A-ball, short season A-ball, AA, AAA. How competitive do I want them to be? How important is it that they win championships, or is it important that the parent club, the Major League Club, win championships? So that's what I mean by you're going to have different tiers. You go into larger athletic departments, you're going to have oftentimes different tiers, tier 1, tier 2, and what sometimes people call their Olympic sports. It means that their goal, they would love to win, but they're not necessarily funding them or giving them the capital, facilities, if you will, that's going to put them in position to be a national champ on a regular basis. Of course, there can only be one of those. The last 2 are very important. Character. You know, I just gave you the example on recruiting. I mean, one of the most important things, whether you're recruiting an athlete, or whether you're hiring head coaches, or hiring key assistants, associates, or directors, you know, that whole good to great thing is important. Getting the right people in the right seat on the right bus. So how you assemble your team of people. So one of the hardest things you'll ever do is go through search and recruiting processes. They're very tedious. I'm in the throes of 2. I got 2 more that I initiated or started the process of this morning. I mean, you will spend 12, 14, 15 hours a day during that process to try and find that right fit that's going to have an impact. Why is it so important? Well, because if you're going to be a great organization to be a part of and enjoy success, the team you put together is one of the single most important things you'll do. And you'll spend a lot of time in your experiences trying to look for those clues, those indicators of, all right, how do I forecast right fit? Okay? It's kind of like in my recruit, how do I forecast that 6'3", 170-pound, you know, gangly pitcher on the mound, you know, might be a really good draft pick and win a lot of games for me? Well, it's not an exact science. It's probably more of a craft than a science. But there are things that you can measure and research that you can do to put yourself in position for that. Some of the greatest jobs, at least in my mind, are, you know, being a territorial scout, a regional scout, or a national cross-checker for professional sport organizations. But it takes a long time, a lot of experience to get to that point. And the last one's community. Community is what makes life, gives life meaning, okay? So you've got your internal department or organizational community, but you get the community in which you participate, compete, but you've got a lot of other communities too, where you do your marketing. And if you're in college athletics, your alumni, fan bases, and they're really important. I spent a lot of time on a map, okay, and I'll go ahead and get to that here real quick. What we talked about was polarities, and then I'll get into, this is actually a, you know, for those of you here on Monday, this is a working example of a dilemma I dealt with. But here's what I want you, in reviewing this, here's what I want you to, some of the key leadership things, at least in my mind, and from experience, I want you to kind of grasp and take from this. Every dilemma you deal with, you're not going to take the time to map it, okay? Remember this, you won't have a lot of problems in leadership. Problems are either or. You can identify either this happens or that, leading to a result. But most of the time, you'll deal with dilemmas, where you're trying to figure out how to do both this and that. So dilemma is both and the problem is either or. The example I gave to you on a polarity, which means you got 2 opposites out here, is you need inhale and then exhale. Those are opposite, right? But the $10 word is they're interdependent, meaning you can't remain alive and take in oxygen to keep your body living and vibrant and enjoying life without figuring out how to manage those 2 opposites. Okay? That's why it's both this and that. You know, we had a conversation on Monday. Today's the final day of a fee referendum, and that's a bit of a dilemma. Okay? You get 2 fees out there. You got an athletic fee and some of the benefits of that. Remember, some being a key word. And you got a recreation fee out here. That was an answer to a dilemma. How do we do both this and that? Well, what would be some of the examples of that? Well, how do we expand our spaces in recreation? Well, to be cognizant of the fact, aware of the fact that over the last 2 years, we've grown international students. Meaning we've got over twice as many. We've got over 1,000. Okay? And being aware of the fact that 600 of them want to play cricket. And then you've got another few hundred wanting to play soccer. And then you've got another few hundred playing tennis. So culturally, what's that mean? Okay, are those sports that are played in America? Well, yeah. But are they a bigger deal in some other countries than America? Well, yeah. Okay, so you can change your spaces and your facilities there, but how do you take care of, you got a long list of athletic stuff. Okay? Well, you need to balance growth of your programs, your women's programs, but at the same time you're in debt and you got a lot of needs in your current programs. So how do you give something back? That's a both and work those together. That's like inhaling and exhaling. Now let's go back to the 5 C's and look at this. Do you remember, right? This was, he's got opposites here. You got a community that has 3 high schools, and you got this great history of championships, coaches in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, Lou Saban's home area, Rich Rodriguez's home area. But you get these crummy facilities. And people remembering all this greatness over here. So you got your past and your present habits where people are creating their own silos. And they weren't partnering on anything. Rather, they were complaining. And so you got all this animosity. Chat lines are going crazy. Then you got all those future goals and stuff out here. That's not hard to come up with. Because, I mean, if you're an athlete, you know ideally what they want. They've got computers. They've got iPhones. You know, why can't we have facilities like whatever, you fill in the blank, some big institution, some bigger city? Well, the problem is they've got a dilemma. And what happens is you get stuck right here in the middle. So one of the more important takeaways is, you know, when you're leading, real quickly determine, is this a problem or is this a dilemma? Now, in this right here, this map, this was a big one because it dealt with literally thousands of people. It dealt with a lot of years over here. It dealt with a lot of money, millions and millions of dollars over here to get to the future. So it was one we did put on the map to try and get some clarity to it. And then it had about 250 pages of a strategic plan. The good news is they worked a plan and it happened. But every one of those 5 C's is in here. This deals with cash to try and change the facilities, but it's not going to fall out of the sky. Okay? It deals with the compliant parts of it because it is, like those fees, etc., it is adding programs. They hadn't been doing it. Okay? And there was a way by adding those, and yeah, they were fighting, well, no, I'm not going to vote for that. What do I get? We got all kinds of needs you're not listening to. Here's what happens, though, if you do this. You get both this and that. Because you're partnering. Very rarely, whether it's governance or the whole financial part of it, are you going to be able to get there by yourself. You're going to find yourself in a lot of dilemmas trying to identify real quick and clear what's going on so you can create partnerships. The whole competitive piece is in here. I mean, they want to taste more of this in the future and present. At the end of the day, they want to be chance again. They're tired of not being it. They had it before. They don't have it now. Why? They got complacent. They didn't have a plan. Okay? The whole community element, that's all it is. It's not going to happen without community and the character element of it. You can't calm down and you can't demonstrate, I heard you, here's your item, here's your item, here's your item. The key thing you want to understand here, that's where you want to, that's where you're headed. You want great facilities and you want to engage your community so that you can experience the past success in the today and in the future and build it to last. Okay, but you've got some markers down here. Okay, how am I going to know if it's swirling and going down? What's the quick takeaway? A couple of quick takeaways here. Okay, remember the difference between a polarity and a problem. 1. 2, polarities aren't linear. Okay? I mean, you're going to have all this dynamic. You got to be aware of somebody starts over focusing on the past and negatively, you're not going to get there. And you got to be cognizant of that. That's where your people and leadership skills. So wait a second, remember our plan. Let me help clarify this. Get in there and do that. Thirdly, understand this. When you find yourself in those leadership roles, remember, your role isn't necessarily to go in because your pockets are filled with all the solutions. They're not. Okay? They're not. If you can't write in one paragraph a clear description of that dilemma, you don't know all the information enough. Remember that. That's your test. If you can't, in about 3 to 5 sentences, answer the question, what's going on here now? You don't know enough yet. So go engage with your adversary and collect some information and data. Okay? 2, your role isn't necessarily to have all the answers. I don't care what organization, what community, what level, professional, collegiate, high school, rec, tourism, they're going to be very smart and experienced people in your organization. Your job is first of all, most importantly, to ask the right questions. And most of the time, those aren't going to be the questions they asked in the past. Those aren't going to be necessarily the complaints. You, underneath that, say, okay, you're mad about, you used to be really good. You're mad about blaming a college president, or you're blaming a high school superintendent, or you're blaming a mayor that they don't listen to you, so you're screaming louder now because you want different facilities. Okay? You find out how they want them different. You find out the needs of all those, and you bring them together to create that partnership. You're not going to have all the answers. Once you can write that paragraph and you've listened and you collect your data, you're going to come up with some solutions. But remember this, the source of that information was the people around the table. Now, if they buy in and you reinforce them for being candid and staying on point, you're going to have a team that's going to help you accomplish whatever those goals are. Those are big projects that you might put on a map. And you're going to be able to accomplish it quickly. We don't need to go through that. I'm going to jump ahead to, I'm just going to walk you through kind of some of those 5 C's on something that every department and every division in this university does on an annual basis. This is actually part of accreditation. It's called an IEP. It stands for your Institutional Effectiveness Plan. Think of it this way. It's a short-term strategic plan. It's a $10 word. It's not going to excite you to be a director, executive director, president necessarily to say, hey, you got to be good at strategic plans. But you know what? You do. But don't let that term scare you from that standpoint. Remember, the 5 things that you're going to be trying to identify, regardless of your level, is, okay, what are your 5 C's? How do we create goals that we can measure? They're going to take us to whatever that vision, that longer-term vision or goal is here. Well, this particular one, and this particular year, the division I lead of athletics and campus rec, that was a new division created a year ago. We used to have 5, we got 4, but we realigned. Okay? That in itself was a polarity map, kind of, sort of president and saying, okay, our needs have changed. We need to reorganize in this way. This will tell you a little bit about Division 2 also. I wouldn't typically show this slide to a university community, but because that division was new and there's a new audience on this, some of the things that make Division 2 unique from a governance standpoint, it's a partial scholarship aid model. The academic achievement rate, that's the measurable they use. So you've got people that are filling that out every year. That's a 6-year graduation rate. They're tracking everyone who's ever been on a squad roster. That may not excite you, but you better be good at it. You can't mess up. The national average is 71% graduate within 6 years or less. And then the whole competition and service to community, Division 2 does differently. Orlando.
Why 6 years? Is it because of the regiment that they have to follow while playing athletics and giving them an extra redshirt years? Yeah.
Well, it's a good question. It's a good comment there. Actually, even universities outside of athletics will do a 4 and a 6-year graduation rate. And you did identify some of the principles there, but actually, it's probably more of what is the larger national norm outside of athletics. What's the average time to degree for a college student in America? Well, it's 5 years and change, okay? So that's principally why they use a 6-year graduation rate, okay? In the federal government, larger university does, it's called your IPEDS rate, okay? But you'll do a 4-year and a 6-year IPEDS. Okay, this is kind of philosophically, you got to understand how athletics aids a university. And there are a lot of different ways. This one's really focused on the enrollment and the financial element of it. And by the way, whether it's Division 1, 2, or 3, Division Division I uses an APR. Use a little different instrument in Division II and ASR. Division III doesn't do one, but they track it in a unique way. These rates are always higher than the non-student athlete national rates, okay? Now, it doesn't mean that Notre Dame or Princeton doesn't have a rate higher than that. They do, okay? Those are highly selective institutions. They shut down admissions on January 15. Notre Dame's graduation rate is, the first number is always 9, okay? So over 9 out of 10 students who go to Notre Dame graduate. I'm not talking about athletics, I'm just talking about students, okay? That's a reflection of the type of university and the pool that their application pool, if you will. It's highly competitive. So as that increases, so too does that rate, all right? Okay, for example, a federal cost of attendance for a student to go here 1 year ago was about $19,500 in round numbers. We had 276 student athletes on scholarship. Now, not all of them are taking a full meal plan and staying in the most expensive dorm, etc. So there's some flaws to using that. But to give you a general benchmark, what that means is you got about $5.4 million of just payables coming to the university on that small group, if you will. 22% of our athletes a year ago were walk-ons, meaning they were receiving no athletic aid. So that's another $1.5 million using the same multiplier. And then in athletic scholarships, we spent out a little over $1.3 million, which actually is the lowest in the conference for co-ed football schools. So our lowest, not counting Cameron and TWU. So if you take, if you subtract this from the sum of the other two figures, you've got a net of about $5.6 million just on tuition fees, room board, etc. that's coming to the institution. So that's where you get your estimated net. Where it says WSCH, that stands for Weighted Semester Credit Hour. That's how universities in Texas receive money from the state. Okay? It'd take me too long to explain that, but you need to know how that works if you're in that role. You don't need to know how it works today, however. But it means that sum is actually higher than this. Okay? So there's additional revenue that goes to the academy, meaning academic affairs, to support teacher salaries, these classrooms, the technology we're utilizing, etc. Then in Division II, Division II does a nice job on research. And as you move up the governance role, you have to have an appreciation for research. Either you better hire some good people around you who do, okay? Because as you grow, remember that community we were looking at in that map? Somewhere along the line, when I said they got complacent and thought it would just continue on forever by its own, they stopped doing that research. They stopped doing those plans, okay? You go 20 years, waking up every morning, asking the question, well, who are we going to beat today? And then your competitors, they put together a good plan, they build better facilities, they add more scholarships, they pay their people. You're going to find yourself at the bottom of the heap. Division II's got a multiplier which says for every student athlete who comes to your campus, 1.7 additional students will come to attend your university or college. How's that happen? Well, it could be a high school teammate. It could be someone from your community, someone you met at camp, a cousin, a brother or sister, etc. But that's a pretty sound longitudinal research number. So it says that you've got another 602 students using this multiplier up here, about another $11.75 million of revenue if you do athletics well. And these type of things need to be in your plan and how you're going to move the organization forward. Otherwise, when you go in to speak to your coaches, you go in to speak to your student athletes saying, hey, I need a new locker room. Our transportation stinks. We got less scholarship than so-and-so. All these, you're not going to be able to know how to manage those, and it's going to be really uncomfortable going into those spaces, okay? The better you do your research, the better you do your plan, the more confidence they have in your leadership, and the more that will unfold. Actually, if I pause for a minute and tell you some of the things, at least from a college athletics standpoint, that you would need to really try and put in your toolbox in how you lead to be a really good director or vice president or executive director. One, you need to be supportive of your people. Two, and it goes back, remember I gave you that list of 3? System, simplify, and treat each person like an individual. You need to be available to listen. Okay? Always make time to do that. As you move to those higher levels, if you've got a great body of work, and you will make a very good living at some point in your career. You will make a very good living. But if you don't do these things, you'll never get to that point. You also want to be fair to all sports, okay? Which means you need to do the research, you need to know what they have, but you also have to have plans to move them along. If they know there's hope in the future and we're working a plan together, partnership, like that big polarity map, if they know and have confidence you're moving forward on it, it'll usually happen faster than you even envision. They need to know that you're going to be honest. Your yes is a yes and your no is a no, which means you walk your talk, that you've got integrity. Number 5, it really helps. You've got to be a good communicator, okay? For me, you know, I was the guy in high school who was scared to death to dial the phone. Yes, we still had rotary dials. To ask a girl to a dance or what have you, okay? My dream was to be a college head coach. I realized my dream very quickly in life. I was a very young man in my mid-20s. But in that role, I had to get over whatever shyness, reluctance, etc. I might have in speaking to recruits, dialing the phone to talk to a recruit, running a camp, running a practice, running a team at the Division I level, raising money with a donor. I had to get beyond those. We don't all necessarily come out of the womb with those skills, but you know what? We're all capable of those, okay? As long as we can think. And a lot of what we're talking about here is how we think in our mind and then how we communicate to people. So if you ask me, what are 2 of the most important skills? Your ability to speak and to think on your feet. And if I were to add a 3rd, your ability to write well. It doesn't have to be flowery. In fact, it's better that it's not, but to write clearly. Remember what I said there? You find yourself in a big, hairy dilemma. Try and write it in 3 to 5 sentences and describe it. And if you can, you understand it. The more important thing is, beyond that, you know how to get around a boardroom or get in front of a big audience and start asking those questions, bless you, that will lead to those solutions to help make change. 6, and it's really important, and sometimes you really got to fake it. I'm faking it right now. I just came from two meetings, president, human resources, etc. But you got to be organized, okay? And being organized plays into systems, okay? Your team's all got to eat when they travel. They've all got some type of facility. I mean, there are common core things there that you can identify and create systems so that those flywheels can spin without your micromanagement or control. Because if you got to micromanage those, you're not doing a good job. And to be honest with you, you're spending too much time in areas that aren't going to move you forward. Those things ought to get to the point where they're self-sufficient. One of the things that helps, I've got a lot of very close associates and friends who have never coached before. And they're, I mean, I look up to them. Some of them are my junior in age and experience. And they came into their respective roles through sales or marketing or even TV, radio. They're very good. One of the things, however, it does help. It's not, in fact, in a Lone Star conference, I think with one exception, I'm the only one around the table who's been a head coach. Okay, that helps. That helps a great deal because that is. So the way I would say it is, one of the key things, they've either coached or they clearly understand how to communicate with coaches and how that life works. That's one of the single most difficult jobs one could have. You're in a fishbowl, And you're only as good as your last 9 innings, 40 minutes, 60 minutes, whatever the sport you play. 8, and this is a hard one, because you'll have a number of people get in your face or say things on chat lines or newspapers or to other people that get back to you complaining, but you have got to be good at soliciting and acquiring the funds you're going to need to realize the vision you have for those goals. You just can't wish them. Okay, you got to have a plan on how to get there. And that part is very, very hard, and it doesn't stop at any point. That is a constant. You will wake up every morning with that rock in your pocket. So while those are good jobs, and while a lot of them pay very well, you will be available, and you will work 6 and 7 days. You will work. If you got a week that's under 60 hours, you did pretty good that week, okay? And you will go to bed at night on a fairly frequent basis, somewhere in the forefront or back of your mind, thinking about, sometimes worrying about, revenue, and that whole process of acquiring those funds. The ninth thing I would say is, and this may sound a little different to you, but head coaches want feedback. And that goes with being accessible. One of the things I shared right at the forefront, they want feedback, and they want to know that in those systems and in those plans that you hold people accountable. That's a hard deal, okay? You watch ESPN, you read the newspapers, etc. You do hire, and you do that, okay? And that's hard. It is. And one of the things that being a good communicator, you always remember how you finish. I had to speak to 2 different teams, 2 different evenings last week where coaching changes had occurred. And, one of the things I could share with them, 1, I've been in your seat as a player. I had 3 head coaches in college. 2, I've been in your coach's seat. Okay? My career didn't necessarily end on my timeline. It ended with a buyout. Okay? Thirdly, I've obviously sat in the other seat when we're going to make those decisions. Okay? That is part of the progression we typically make, particularly if we're coming into these leadership positions out of the coaching world. That's not the only route. But like I said, in that either you've coached, or you have a really clear understanding of their life. And it is a hard life. Which what I'm saying is that they got to know that you're empathetic, that you can walk in their shoes. Okay, you can't view it like the person who comments on a chat line necessarily, who sees it as simple because that's their hobby. It's not that simple. It's not. There are a lot of factors. So coaches want feedback, and they want to know that you're holding people accountable to certain performance levels. And I don't think there's a course or a training regimen that prepares you for those conversations. Just remember, people always remember how they finish. And there is a way that you can bring someone's tenure, their job to closure. And then not necessarily, it's still going to hurt. Okay? They shouldn't be surprised. Because otherwise you weren't accessible and you didn't provide that feedback all those months leading up to it. Okay? Never surprise them. That's not good leadership on that end. And then you got to have vision, and you've got to be visible. One of the things you got to be aware of that when the day comes, you move into whatever that job is, whether you're the director of something or the executive vice president of this, or whatever it is, the associate of that. The first 100 days in that role, and I would say even most of the roles before that, your first 100 days are critical. So having vision and being visible will work together. You need to have a vision. It doesn't have to be complex, and it shouldn't be. It should be a phrase or no more than a sentence of whatever that new job you've just accepted, what you'd like to see it become. Because you've got to speak to that, to the people who report to you, the people who you want to support you, whether it's financially or in the sense of community. And secondly, you gotta be visible. And you'll know that you're not being visible if, hey, how you doing? I haven't seen you in a month or two. Hey, where you been? They're saying something deeper when they're saying that. Okay? You can't be all things to everybody. But, you know, if you're really up the ladder, make sure your people in public relations, sports information, marketing, promotions are documenting your travels. And it helps. I mean, maybe you're putting out a weekly blog. Maybe you're putting out a weekly note to your employees. Maybe you're putting out anything you do to engage them there will extinguish that one question. Because when they say, I haven't seen you, how you been, where you been, it means they haven't been engaged by you. And the left-handed compliment is they want to engage you. But remember this. I'll give you an example. It wasn't here, it was a stop or two ago. I had a head coach who was mad about things that dealt with finances and salary. And he'd done a fairly good job in his program, okay? They'd gone to postseason, they'd won conference, that sort of thing. And he wanted all this right here immediately because, okay, I went from here this year to there. And I want all this. So one of his statements was, I know if the president will just give me 90 minutes, I can convince him. Okay? Well, a couple things there. One, anybody know how many employees our president has here? You want to guess?
Everybody that's on staff,
Yeah, everybody. Everybody works here.
maintenance,
How many students do we have?
800 and something?
Yeah, round number 8,000. We were 7,800 and change this fall. Okay, anybody know how many employees? About 1,100. Yeah. Okay. Anybody from kind of a small town? I grew up in a town about 5,000. How big is your town?
3,000.
Okay. How about you?
It's like 200 maybe.
Well, that really is small.
Yeah.
Cool. So he's running a city of over 9,000. My dad was a long-time college vice president, over 30 years. And one of the things he said to me, and it was really humbling, because I'd made a statement to him, and he looked at me and he said, Scott, let me tell you something. He said, you need to understand how many students and employees your president has. Anybody know what our operating budget here, everything is? It's about $130 million, okay? So you're running a city. Okay? I mean, if you're at College Station, Ohio State, University of Maryland, University of Central Florida, these are universities between 50 and 60,000 students with thousands of employees. And from a budget standpoint, those are between 2 and 3 billion, not million, billion. Okay? So in that, how accessible can that president be to that person who's way over here saying, I just need 90 minutes of your time? And that's one of the dilemmas that you'll have even as a director, because I'm not comparing being a president to, say, being an athletic director. But if you know, you ask the question on why is it 6 instead of 4, anybody know what the average length of tenure of a college president is in round numbers? Any level. I mean, just generally speaking. It's under 5 years, it's about 4.7 years. Anybody know what the average length of tenure of an athletic director is? Rostov. It's about 4.7. Okay? Now, in a lot of cases, they report one to the other. I mean, the AD to the president. But there's also some backstage elements to that. Okay? You are not chief of the boat. Don't ever make the mistake of assuming you are as a director in those type of roles. However, you have a public audience that is very, very large. And you're not going to know them all. But guess what? Thousands of them that you don't know exactly who you are. And that's easy to forget. But that whole vision and visibility and connection are very important things. I'm getting close to running out of time. And we didn't even get too far beyond that, which is okay. Because hopefully in giving you those 5 C's and some working examples and give you some of the bones to leadership, I'm curious what questions you've got. They completely bore you?
No.
Why not?
Because done a lot of, what you've done in a small, well, I've done my experiences, leadership experiences through the military, and I have that experience, and I try and share that with these students. I mean, I know I'm older and all that, but I understand a lot more than they probably understand, you know.
Well, you've lived more experiences.
Right. And I've lived.
Those 5 C's are kind of your 5-point battle plan.
Right.
I don't know what your MOS was, but if it was infantry.
I was an aviation ordnance maintain weapon systems, and I actually ran department. I was like third in line of running the department, so I know a lot of budgeting, and I know a lot of, you know, how to balance it all. You know, and it's hard. It is really hard, especially when you're not ready for it.
Oh, yeah. And in sport, remember our audience. I mean, about as soon as we produce our product, our fans consume it. You know, whether in the stands, in the arena, on television, web, whatever it is, okay? And there'll be a certain percentage of them that don't view what you do as a professional job that required really intensive training, that required great pains academically. But folks, sport is one of the 3 largest industries in all 50 states in our country. So what you're getting a degree in sport business is high-end business. And the tools you take from this curriculum can hold you in great stead. The first sport business program didn't even begin until, I think, 1966 at Ohio University. So the advantages you have now, and sports changed a lot since 1966. We didn't have cable TV, we didn't have computers, laptops. We certainly wouldn't be teaching like this, and we couldn't compute a lot of this data that quickly. There's a downside to that. That information moves so quick, you can't be in all those places at the same time. Those systems become real important. Simplifying them so that you spend most of your time on things that are most important can be real important. Like that paradox, or that polarity map, they got off point. Okay? That's what happened. And then you had a big fight with little sticks that have been going on for years. It takes a while to unravel that. The other thing is, if you find yourself in a leadership position, maybe ahead of your chronological years, it will be in places like that polarity map. Okay? You will be in a change management area. Why? Well, 1, because you're not experiencing success, and 2, because of that, it probably doesn't pay all that well. And 3, because of the first 2 things, it's not attractive, or as attractive, to highly experienced professionals in the industry. You look up, man, you got an interview at a place like that. But you have to understand, okay, this is a change management deal. You can't run that like you would run someplace that's got going on. Okay? All right, I think I'm out of time. All right, folks. Orlando, you got all the technology here?
I do.